It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon in a sleepy Georgia town. The sun was soft in the sky, casting golden rays through the trees, and birds chirped over the hum of passing cars. People were going about their day, shopping, grabbing coffee, walking dogs. But for one black woman named Dana Monroe, this day was about to unravel in a way that would make national headlines. Dana had no idea that stepping out of her car to grab groceries would turn into a confrontation that could have taken her life. She was calm, dressed in a simple blue blouse and jeans with her curly hair pulled back and a canvas tote on her shoulder. Nothing about her was threatening. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't resisting, she was just walking, head held high, confident, unbothered. But for one rookie policewoman sitting in her cruiser just a few feet away, something about Dana seemed off. Officer Kelsey Harper was new to the job. She'd only been wearing the badge for 6 months, but had already built a reputation in town for being edgy, always quick to escalate situations. People whispered about her behind closed doors, the way she stared down folks who didn't look like her, the way her hand hovered over her gun just a second too long during traffic stops. That day, she was on patrol, bored, edgy, and looking for something or someone to justify her presence. And then she saw Dana. Kelsey watched as Dana parked her luxury sedan, a sleek black BMW, and stepped out with quiet confidence. Something about that rubbed her the wrong way. It wasn't illegal, wasn't dangerous, but it made Kelsey sit up straighter. A young black woman in an expensive car. In her mind, that had to mean something. She followed Dana into the parking lot, slow at first, then faster. Dana, unaware, reached into her bag to check her grocery list. That simple, harmless gesture was all Kelsey needed. She unholstered her gun. "Ma'am, put your hands where I can see them," Kelsey shouted. The people nearby turned to look, startled. A mother pulled her toddler close. An older man dropped his coffee. Dana froze. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and landed with a soft thud on the ground. She raised her hands slowly, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "Officer, I haven't done anything." But Kelsey didn't hear her, or maybe she didn't want to. She stepped closer, gun still raised, finger twitching just slightly near the trigger. "Don't move," I said. "Don't move." Dana's heart was pounding now, not just because of the weapon pointed at her face, but because she knew how quickly these situations could go wrong. Her eyes scanned the area for witnesses, and thankfully, several phones were already out, recording. "Please," Dana said, as calm as she could manage. "I'm just here to shop. I'm not a threat. You can check my ID." "I don't want to see your ID," Kelsey snapped. "I gave you an order." The tension was thick. One wrong move, one cough, one gust of wind could have changed the whole course of this story. But before anything else could happen, there was a sound in the distance, a deep rumble of tires crunching on gravel. A white SUV pulled up, fast, stopping just inches from the scene. The door flew open. Sheriff Raymond Cole stepped out. He was a tall man in his early 60s, salt and pepper beard, and eyes that had seen too much over the years. A veteran of the force, respected by the entire county, known for being fair, even when it wasn't easy. And the moment his boots hit the ground, Kelsey's posture changed. She turned her head slightly, still holding the gun in both hands, her breath short. Her eyes widened. Her fingers trembled. Sheriff Cole didn't shout, he didn't run, he just walked slowly, purposefully. His gaze locked on her. "Kelsey," he said, firm but quiet. "Put the gun down." "Sheriff." She looked suspicious, I thought. I said, "Put it down." Kelsey hesitated for a second, then lowered her weapon. Dana still hadn't moved. "Step away from her," the sheriff continued. Kelsey stepped back. Her face had gone pale. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I didn't know who she was." Sheriff Cole turned toward Dana with a look of deep respect. He nodded slowly and gave a small bow, not exaggerated, not theatrical, just a quiet gesture of recognition. Something in that moment shifted. The bystanders noticed it, the cameras caught it, and Kelsey's world started to crumble right then and there, because what Kelsey didn't know was that Dana Monroe wasn't just another citizen. She wasn't just a shopper. She was someone powerful, someone whose story stretched far beyond the borders of that town. Her name carried weight. Her face, though rarely shown on the news, was known in circles of policy and justice. But while all this was happening, miles away, something else was unfolding. On a city bus winding through downtown Atlanta, a young black teenager named Jordan sat near the back, earbuds in, hoodie pulled low. The ride was long and his feet hurt from standing all day at his part-time job. But he was used to it. He never complained. He was watching the world pass by when he saw her. A white woman, pregnant, maybe in her late 20s, holding the rail and swaying slightly with the movement of the bus. Nobody offered her a seat. Some people looked away. Others pretended not to notice. But Jordan noticed. Without hesitation, he stood, tapped her arm gently, and motioned for her to sit. She smiled, surprised, and gratefully lowered herself into the seat. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were kind. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." Jordan just nodded, returned to his place by the pole, and didn't think much more of it. But as the bus neared her stop, she scribbled something quickly on the back of a receipt. She folded it twice, pressed it into his hand, and smiled again. "Don't lose this," she said softly. "It might change your life." He looked down, puzzled. It was just a piece of paper, but something about her tone made him tuck it carefully into his jacket pocket. He didn't read it right away. Not yet. Back in the parking lot, Dana and Sheriff Cole were now inside the grocery store office, away from the growing crowd. Kelsey was in the back of a squad car, trembling, realizing just how badly she had misjudged the moment. Dana sat calmly, sipping water, while the sheriff paced slowly. He didn't apologize, not yet, but his expression was full of regret. "People will ask why I bowed," he finally said. Dana looked up. "And what will you tell them?" "I'll tell them the truth." Outside, the town was buzzing. Videos were already going viral. And somewhere on a bus just pulling away from downtown, a young man was about to unfold a note that would connect him to everything and change the future in ways no one could have imagined. But that's where we'll leave it for now. Because sometimes stories begin not with answers but with questions. Who is Dana Monroe? What power does she hold? Why did the sheriff bow? And what exactly was written on that mysterious piece of paper Jordan now held in his hands? The answers are coming. But not just yet. Not until the truth forces its way into the light. Jordan stepped off the bus into the cool evening air, the worn piece of paper still folded neatly in his jacket pocket. He hadn't opened it yet, not because he wasn't curious, but because something about the woman's voice had made him feel like it wasn't just a note. It was something bigger. He didn't know why, but he felt like it had weight, like the words inside were waiting for the right moment. He walked the familiar streets toward his grandmother's house, passing by corner stores, old brick buildings, and streetlights that flickered as if unsure whether to stay on. Jordan's world had always been a mix of quiet dreams and heavy reality. His mom had passed when he was 9. His dad was in and out, more out than in. And his grandmother, Miss Loretta, was the one holding him together all these years. As he walked through the front gate and up the steps to the small house, she was already at the door, peeking through the blinds. She always waited up for him no matter how tired she was. "You all right, baby?" she asked as he stepped in. He nodded and kicked off his shoes. "Yeah, just tired." She kissed the top of his head and went back to the kitchen, where a pot of beans simmered low on the stove. The smell was comforting, like home, but even as he sat down at the table, his hand went to the pocket where the note was tucked. He could feel the crease of the paper through the fabric. Still, he didn't take it out, not yet. Miles away, Dana Monroe was seated in a quiet room of the sheriff's department. It wasn't an interrogation room, but it felt cold all the same. Sheriff Cole had asked her to stay while things were sorted out with Officer Harper. Dana had agreed, not out of obligation, but because she needed to see how this would be handled. She stared at the clock on the wall. Time felt slow. Her fingers, tapped softly on the wooden table. There were things about Dana that very few people in that town knew. To them, she was just another face they hadn't seen before. A woman in a nice car. But Dana was much more than that. She had grown up in Washington, D.C., raised by parents who had both served in government. Her father had been a senior legal advisor, her mother a respected policy analyst. Dana had inherited their intelligence, their strength, and their deep sense of justice. She went to law school at Yale, then moved into federal service, quietly rising through the ranks, not making noise, just doing her job better than anyone expected. By the time she was 34, she had become one of the lead advisors in a classified Homeland Policy program that dealt directly with national-level law enforcement reforms. She didn't seek fame, she didn't crave attention, but she knew how power worked. She knew what silence could do. And she knew that sometimes being underestimated was her greatest weapon. So when Kelsey Harper pointed a gun at her, Dana hadn't panicked. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she had seen much worse. She'd walked through halls of power where decisions were made that shaped people's lives. She'd seen systems built on fear, policies dressed as protection, and people hurt in the name of order. Dana had learned to keep her voice steady even when her heart raced. That's what had kept her alive. Outside the room, Sheriff Cole was speaking to Kelsey, who now sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face was still flushed, her voice shaky. "I didn't know who she was," she repeated. "That's the problem," the sheriff replied. "You didn't need to know her name to treat her with respect. She did nothing wrong. You escalated a peaceful moment into a threat. I thought she was reaching for something. She was checking a list in her bag. She didn't resist. She didn't run. She didn't raise her voice. I was trained to be alert," Kelsey said, a defensive edge creeping in. "You were trained to use judgment," Sheriff Cole said quietly. "Not fear." The words hung in the air. Back at Miss Loretta's house, Jordan finally pulled the note from his jacket. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing the creases with his thumb. The handwriting was neat, careful, almost elegant. He read the words once, then again, and something inside him shifted. "Your kindness may seem small now, but it will open a door you never imagined. Go to the address below tomorrow at noon. Be dressed for opportunity." An address was written underneath. A street in Midtown. A suite number. That was it. No name. No company. No reason. Jordan stared at the paper like it was a puzzle he wasn't sure how to solve. "Everything all right?" Miss Loretta asked from the hallway. He folded the note again and looked up. "Yeah, just thinking." She raised an eyebrow. "Thinking usually leads to something," he smiled faintly. "Hope so." That night, sleep didn't come easy for either Jordan or Dana. Dana sat in her hotel room with the curtains drawn, her laptop open on the bed, files and names and reports scrolling by. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for patterns. There had been a rise in incidents like this lately. Untrained or biased officers, questionable stops, small towns being swallowed by bigger issues. But this time, it had happened to her, and she wasn't going to let it slide. Jordan, meanwhile, lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman's eyes, the way she'd looked at him, not just with gratitude but with recognition, like she saw something in him even he didn't see yet. He pulled out the note again and read it a third time. Be dressed for opportunity. Whatever that meant, he was going to show up. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the town, casting golden light over houses, sidewalks, and people beginning another day. But for Jordan and Dana, the day wouldn't be ordinary. One would walk into a future he didn't know existed, and the other would hold a mirror up to the very system that had tried to break her. But for now, both of them were waiting, unaware that their paths were about to cross and change everything. By late morning, Jordan stood in front of the tall glass building downtown, his reflection staring back at him. He had dressed as best he could, a clean button-up shirt his grandmother had ironed that morning, khakis that were a little too short, and scuffed sneakers. He had washed his face twice and even put on the cologne his uncle gave him last Christmas. He still felt out of place. Around him, people walked fast, wearing suits, carrying coffee cups and phones like extensions of their hands. He checked the paper again. The address matched. Suite 1207. His heart pounded as he entered the lobby. It was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the tap of heels on marble floors. He stepped onto the elevator, alone, and pressed the button for the 12th floor. The doors closed and the elevator began to rise, each ding making his stomach tighter. When the doors slid open, he stepped out onto a hallway lined with offices. At the end was a glass door with gold lettering, Monroe Strategies, Policy, Community, Change. He hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside, a woman at the front desk looked up and smiled. "You must be Jordan." He blinked. Yeah. How did you know?" She stood and motioned for him to follow. "Ms. Monroe is expecting you." As he walked through the office, he passed a row of desks, people typing quietly, others in soft conversation. The air smelled of coffee and paper, and something faintly sweet, maybe fresh flowers. It was nothing like anything he'd known. Dana stood by the window of her office, looking out over the city. When Jordan entered, she turned and smiled warmly. "Glad you came," she said. He nodded, unsure what to say. He was still trying to understand how any of this connected to a seat on a bus. "I'm Dana Monroe," she continued. "We met briefly yesterday. You offered your seat without hesitation. That small act told me a lot." Jordan fidgeted with the hem of his sleeve. She looked tired. "I didn't think much of it." "That's exactly why it mattered," Dana replied. "Kindness without calculation is rare. I've worked spaces where people do things for show, for gain, for power. You didn't." He looked at her, trying to read her expression. "Why am I here?" Dana walked over to a file on her desk. She handed it to him. "I run a mentorship and internship program that helps young people of color gain access to opportunities in law, public service, and policy work. We're funded through several private donors and national community networks. It's not about charity. It's about access, about putting the right people in rooms where decisions are made." Jordan looked down at the folder, flipping it open. Inside was an application already filled out with his name, address, and age. How did you?" "I asked the bus driver for the security footage," Dana said simply. "And I looked you up." Jordan didn't know what to say. His world felt like it had tilted sideways. Across town, Officer Kelsey Harper sat alone in a small conference room, her badge resting on the table. She had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. It wasn't an official suspension yet, but it was close. She was angry. Not just at Dana Monroe, but at the situation, the system, everything. She had always felt like she had to work twice as hard to be noticed. Her training was rigorous, her evaluations clean. She followed protocol, or thought she did. But now, one moment, one mistake, had put everything she'd built at risk. What bothered her most, though, wasn't the sheriff's disappointment. It was the way he had bowed to Dana. As if she wasn't just someone important, but someone untouchable. Kelsey didn't know who Dana really was. Not fully. She only knew the fallout. And as she sat there replaying the incident over and over in her head, a seed of something darker began to grow. Resentment, confusion, even fear. Meanwhile, back in the sheriff's office, Cole sat with a file on his desk. It contained the report he'd written himself, an honest account of what had occurred. He'd been in law enforcement for over 2 decades, and he'd seen what fear could do when it was left unchecked. But this was different. This was about something bigger. He had recognized Dana immediately, not from TV or the news, but from a conference years ago in D.C. She'd been a keynote speaker, talking about structural reform, silent bias, and accountability. Her words had shaken the room, and now she was in his jurisdiction, a direct witness to how far things still had to go. Later that evening, Dana sat alone in her apartment, looking out at the city lights. She hadn't told Jordan everything yet. She hadn't told him that the program she ran wasn't just about mentorship. It was part of a wider network, a coalition working quietly to prepare the next generation of ethical leaders. She hadn't told him that several of her mentees were now in places of influence: judges, policy advisors, city planners. She hadn't told him that she saw something in him that reminded her of herself when she was younger, unsure, overlooked, but sharp and quietly resilient. And she hadn't told him yet that she'd been followed that night after leaving the sheriff's office. That her car had circled the block twice before finally pulling into her garage, or that an unmarked vehicle had parked 2 houses down and stayed there until sunrise. She hadn't told anyone, not yet, because she was still trying to figure out if it was just coincidence or something more. And Jordan, lying in bed that night, stared at the ceiling again. But this time his mind was racing, not with confusion but with possibility. He didn't know where this path would lead or what it meant to be chosen for something so big. But he knew one thing: nothing in his life would ever be the same. And somewhere in the shadows of quiet decisions and unspoken motives, a conflict was brewing, between justice and denial, between power and fear, between those who were ready to change the world and those desperate to stop them. But no one knew yet just how deep the story went. Not even Dana. Not even Jordan.